Manoj, it's a pleasure to welcome you.
Thank you.
We are in your geography, in your hometown. Last time I had the privilege of meeting you in Silicon Valley.
Right.
One thing that stuck out for most of us who are focused entrepreneurs and look up to people like you to inspire us to move forward was your utter humility and the sense of commitment you have to whatever you do. I think that's a great quality for a lot of us to be inspired with. So now we are here in Detroit, close to your hometown. TiEcon Midwest is focused again on similar concepts of fostering entrepreneurship in this region. Detroit is a great comeback story. The whole state is a great comeback story. When we had done this in 2009 and 10, it was in a very different shape. When you look at a grander scale, when economies of this size do a turnaround, what important roles do you think the entrepreneurs can play in reviving economies of this scale?
Okay, for me, I don't really look at it whether on the local level. So to me, it's not relevant. What I try to do is serve a much larger audience. And my purpose, in the end, is to serve an audience that needs to be served rather than just wants to be served. In other words, I try not to do things for rich people. Try to do things for those people who actually need something. So the local level, I mean, certainly we've got, jobs here, and we're doing a bunch of stuff in Detroit. And one of the great parts about Detroit is, the level of skills here, because of automotive, are amazing. And they can be applied to areas which are non-automotive. In fact, they should be applied to areas that are not automotive, because that fresh look into different area. I mean, I have a bunch of tinkerers. I won't call them engineers because they're not fancy degreed guys, but they're Detroit. They're guys that actually make stuff. And so for that reason, this area is really great.
You have the stage 2 lab set up in Farmington Hills.
Yes.
You talked about looking at making an impact to a much broader audience, people who are, who need these solutions. And you said any idea that comes to you, it has to be scalable, 100-fold. That's where you can have the impact. That's where you like to thrive. Wanted to learn a bit more about stage 2.
Well, I'm relatively delusional because I've kind of decided that, okay, I'm going to affect 1 billion people. And 1 billion people who need it. Not, I made your life convenience by giving you an iPhone. I mean, to me that's pointless. It has value, I like my phone and so on, but it's not a meaningful change, it's not a meaningful effect. And so, in order to do that, and then I looked at it and said, what is it that I can do that can make that happen? At that scale, right? And so that's what we found, is we need to come up with things for those people that can be used by those people, not like these fancy government schemes that don't go anywhere. I mean, there's no logic to 3/4 of them, and they don't take into account what the people actually need. They take into account what rich people want you to have. It's a completely different perspective. It's like a business guy saying, talking to his customer saying, I'll tell you what you want. Well, that doesn't make any sense. You have to look at it from the customer's point of view and say, what do they need? And it's not by just asking them. It's actually, if you ask them, they'll tell you the wrong stuff, like most customers. Right? You have to actually walk in their shoes, and then you realize what they really need. And so we did that to some extent and found out in certain areas what they need. And we're still working on other areas, which are just giant areas, that we found out that no progress has been made because nobody seemed to care. Or nobody looked at it as a simple solution. Because to me, if a solution isn't simple, it's not a solution. if you make it so difficult for the other guy to do, yeah, if you do this, if you jump through, these hoops and jump high by 60 feet, you'll be all set. Well, he can't jump 60 feet. Well, that's not my problem. I gave you the solution. No, that's not an answer. So what I look at is say, what can they easily do? What can be done by them ongoing, right? And it's not that we're not smart. We're not smarter than anybody else. We may not even be smart. But just nobody asks these questions. It's not about the answer. It's about the question. And we're still learning. I mean, we're going to fumble here and there. There's no doubt. But and we've had some fumbles where we came up with this bike that you pedal for an hour and have electricity for a day, and we found out it's not complete yet. We went out and put 10 bikes out there to see what would happen, and the results were great. I mean, the effects were more stunning than we thought, but we also learned that there was something missing. And so we went back to the drawing board and said, okay, we got to invent this other thing now, which turned out to be a power pack. Instead of just a battery, a power pack, which is portable, has lights, has the ability to have a fan, it has a phone charger, it has the ability to be charged in other ways. There's even a solar panel on it, which, if you put it out in the sun for an hour, you'll have enough light to walk around in your house or in your room for a couple of hours. So all of those things we learned by going out there and really walking in their shoes and realizing, what do they really need? It's the opposite of, I make fun of this all the time. Of course, as you know, I make fun of everybody. But, people went out and started saying, well, we're going to give you toilets. The reason we're going to give you toilets is because when we visit you, it smells. Right? And from our perspective, it shouldn't smell. So we'll give you toilets. Now, an obvious question would be, wouldn't you want to give them clean water first? They don't have clean water, but you're going to give them toilets. Right? It makes no sense. It's backwards. What they really needed was clean drinking water. So they don't get sick. And toilets are afterward. I'm not saying toilets are bad. It's just, really? I mean, it's sort of like Marie Antoinette. Rich people telling poor people what they should have, right? So, as you can tell, I get excited by this subject.
No, absolutely. That's what we want to get inspired from. You announced the $1 billion initiative for startups who are focused in healthcare, making standards of life better for the billion you said, and also on energy. And that's where we're trying to draw some excitement around it, so people, entrepreneurs can look into this and say there is great opportunities in this space.
Right. Well, part of what we're doing with the medical side is, I've also found out that nobody's going to help, pretty much. Actually, tons of people in the middle class want to help, but none of pretty much the high and mighty, right? So I really understood that I really have to pretty much go out on my own, which is great, which is fine. To me, is if you say, oh, well, I have to do it on my own, I can't do it, well, you're just whining. Come up with a solution, or be quiet, right? So part of what we're doing is all of this work for that billion or billion and a half people, but then the other side is I have to actually make some money. Otherwise, who's going to fund all this stuff? So some of the things that we're doing on the medical side will actually help both rich and poor, and they're so large. The areas that we're addressing are so large. And I'll talk about it a little bit in terms of how misunderstood medical is. There are areas that people think that we should be doing great inventions or innovation, and it's just wrong. You're addressing the wrong thing. And so we're investing this capital. In the next 5 years, 5 to 7 years, we'll probably spend $1 billion in licensing, investing, buying areas of technology in medicine, which we think will aid actual health, not just make a few dollars, right? And as you know, in my opinion anyway, is if you do good stuff, the money comes anyway. It's not, that's, if you chase money, nothing good happens. If you chase good stuff, money comes. So then we'll take that and then put it to use where I really think it should be, which is to those who really need it.
I'm glad you mentioned this last statement, because that's my next question. People who do not have enough money, and enough money could be defined any way you want, and they say, well, when we have that kind of money, I'm willing to give back as well.
Right.
But I don't think it's a matter of waiting for the right kind of amount of money to come to you. It's a mindset you have to have throughout. So how do you, because you signed the giving pledge, giving about 99% of your wealth, I think way back in 2012. So you don't have to be a billionaire to give back. The mindset has to start at a early stage.
It's true. It's what interests you, right? You said, before we started, you said about inspiration and all that stuff. I personally, I don't really care if I inspire people. That's not my aim. My aim is to say, okay, I've got these customers, which are the sort of the poor, bottom half of or bottom quarter of the world. How do I serve them, right? And anybody who wants to look at that, they need to work on it to say, how do we do that? It's like this. When you're hungry, right, and there's no food, you get real smart. You figure out how to do it. Right? Your brain connects, everything is firing on all systems are going, and you figure out how you're going to get your food. But when it comes to doing something of value for other people, well, as soon as I have the time, as soon as I have this, okay. I'm not saying it's bad. I don't really say that, they should do it or they shouldn't do it. To me, for my personal stuff, it's irrelevant. You do what you want to do. All I'm doing is saying, okay, I got to do it. Right? I'm not supposed to, in my mind, I'm not an inspiration. I'm not doing it so people will say, oh, isn't that a good guy? I don't really care. It's irrelevant. Even to me, I don't perceive that I'm just doing it because what else am I going to do? I don't have anything else to do. So it's a simple approach for me. And some people seem to think, okay, that's good.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there'll be people who think, oh, that's terrible. Both are irrelevant to me.
Finally then, Manoj, I have to ask you the entrepreneurship question, but before I ask you, we always tend to focus on expertise, domain knowledge, MBAs, and you have a strong distaste for MBAs. And you go to their domains and you tell them they're wasting their time and money chasing those degrees.
Right.
But as an entrepreneur, 5-Hour Energy is an awesome brand, and it's very inspiring for especially immigrants, regardless of whether they came from India or not, to come to this land of opportunity and be able to create a product that's so mainstream and so hugely successful. So I wanted you to shed some light on the success when now you look back at 5-Hour Energy.
Well, to me, entrepreneurship is fairly simple. I think there's a tendency to make it really complicated. If you go to school for 2 years, well, they have to tell you something over 2 years. If they just tell it to you in the first month, you won't pay their fees for 2 years, and no professor is going to get paid. So we found that in a lot of cases. Even in agriculture, we found we can teach you something that will totally change your productivity for free, right? And it takes about maybe half hour to learn, right? Really simple. Now, there are great agriculture schools and blah, 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 and all that stuff is great. And I'm sure they know a lot more, but I got to 80% in half an hour, right? So the problem is that because it's too simple, you go just past it. You're going to a destination, but you're so interested in going for 2 years that you go past what you really need. And then you have to come back and say, well, I need to use what I learned. And what if you learned from somebody who never did this before? Which is most of the time the case. Right? And I've found even experts to me an expert is somebody who will tell you that there's anything new, you can't do it. Because he's not an expert in it. Right? He'll say, well, no, you can only go this far, because this is what I know. I'm an expert. Don't you understand? I'm the expert. every business that's of any consequence came beyond that, right? So if you listen to experts as to about what your business should be, you're sunk. Now, everything should be, you know, common sense. Now, they may have some valuable stuff in there, but you just don't want to rely on that. That makes no sense to me, anyway. Or people who get great big business degrees and that are taught by people who have never done it before, you know. So now, there's a bunch of degrees I know that are taught by people who've done it. Then it's great. Then it goes to something that's thousands of years old, which is you do something, learn on the job, then you become good at it, and then you teach people. That's the system, and that hasn't changed in thousands of years. But if you just read a book, take tests, and then you start teaching, I don't want to learn from that guy. That makes no sense. Just common sense has been violated.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So Manoj, thank you for being the change maker, for being so different and thinking so differently. And you may not agree, but we all agree. Thank you for inspiring all of us. Appreciate that very much.
Okay, thank you.